Yea, those persons who, etasmin, unto this child, Mahabhagaha, very fortunate, Pritim, affection, Kurvanti, execute, Manavaha, such persons, not, Arayaha, the enemies, Abhibhavanti, to overcome, Etan, those who are attached to Krishna, Vishnu Pakshan, demigods, who always have Lord Vishnu on their side. Eva, like, Asuraha, the demons. Translation: demons, asuras, cannot harm the demigods who always have Lord Vishnu on their side. Similarly, any person or group attached to Krishna is extremely fortunate. Because such persons are very much affectionate toward Krishna, they cannot be defeated by demons like the associates of Kamsa, or by the internal enemies, the senses. You can repeat. Demons, asuras cannot harm the demigods. Who always have Lord Vishnu on their side. Similarly, any person or group attached to Krishna is extremely fortunate. Because such persons are very much affectionate toward Krishna. They cannot be defeated by demons like the associates of Kamsa, or by the internal enemies, the senses. So there's no purport to this text, but Prabhupada actually, by this parentheses at the end, is actually purported. It's interesting because it's not there. It's actually not there in the translation or in the Sanskrit. So Prabhupada's actually given a purport. So I'm going to speak about this particular subject matter. So ya etasmin mahabhaga pritim gurvanti manavaha naryo vivavantyetan Vishnu pakshan ivasuraha. So Om Ganata Vedanda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Meditam Yena Tosmai Shiganavena Maha. So one side point before we talk about what Prabhupada's comment on this verse states is that in the first line of the Sanskrit we have Mahabhaga, and the Bhagaha is said by many of the acharyas when it's pronounced instead of long A, Bhagaha, instead of Bhagaha, to indicate Krishna, who is Bhagavan. So, and we are Bhagavan. We are full of good fortune, and Krishna is Bhagavan. Everyone understand the difference? Bhagavan, Bhagavan, Bhagavan. Anyway, the difference is that we are fortunate, and Krishna is Bhagavan. He is full of the six opulences, right? Like all strength, all knowing, and all famous, all beauty, all these different opulences that are described as Bhagavan. So, anyway, so the acharyas describe that this Mahabhagaha can sometimes be different readings to be Mahabhagaha, reference to Krishna. So anyway, that's a side point. What I wanted to talk about today in class was Prabhupada's final words in the translation, or the internal enemies, the senses. So, oftentimes we think about our external enemies. Of course, a Vaishnava is a Jata Shatava, according to Lord Kapiladev, Shanta Sadhava Sadhabhushana. A Vaishnava has no enemies. So, what does that mean? or Vaishnava doesn't consider anyone, his enemy is never born. First of all, that means that he doesn't look upon anyone as an enemy. And secondly, he doesn't think that anyone is capable of impeding his spiritual progress, because as Prabhupada commented several times, that when he was referring to the word violence, he said violence means to actually impede a living entity's spiritual progress. Just like, for example, if one kills an animal, then you're impeding the progress. Of course, you may say, well, the animal's not chanting Hare Krishna, how are you impeding his spiritual progress? Well, he's supposed to work out a certain amount of karma, and you kill him prematurely, and then he still has to work out the karma in his next life. So you're sort of like not completely stopping his working out his karma, but delaying the whole working out of the karma. So you're impeding or committing violence in this particular regard. But a Vaishnava understands that no one can actually do violence to our spiritual lives. No one can interfere with our spiritual lives, because that's our own responsibility, our spiritual lives. So Vaishnava has no enemies. However, he does understand, just like Srila Prabhupada stated about the Krishna consciousness movement, he said no one can stop the Krishna consciousness movement externally. There's no force that can stop the Krishna consciousness movement. But, there's a big but. But internally, the progress of the Krishna consciousness movement can be stopped by fighting. Devotees fighting, and of course fighting means Vaishnava apparatus. That's what fighting means. Because you're not, unless you actually, as Prabhupada said, give the dog a bad name and hang him. Unless you actually criticize them, at least in your mind, how are you going to attack them? If you think, for example, if I look at Purva and I say, what a great Vaishnava, what a wonderful person, and I'm certainly not going to hit him, what to speak. Or fight with him, isn't it? But before the fight, there has to be at least an internal denigration of a particular individual, or an offense made to an individual. So when you make that offense, that's actually, let's say, either internally or as far as the society, the Krishna conscious society is concerned, it's an impediment in the progress of the Krishna conscious movement, and it's an impediment in your own spiritual lives. So I want to make reference to Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur's writings in this regard, and also Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Bhajan Rahasya, talking about the internal enemies. So of course the internal enemies, as most of you know, are called anarthas. Things that you don't want. So, first of all, we'll talk about the sources of the anarthas. Where do the anarthas come from? And this is, of course, from Madhurya Kadambini by Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur. It's a very important work. So he says the first thing or place that anarthas come from, the enemies come from. These are enemies. They don't come from other temples or anyway, it's amazing how people get into these friends and enemies concepts. For example, and just like, anyway, I don't know if I should, well, the example. Anyway, so just like in the, sometimes when we're having our meetings, we're discussing about the whole female guru issue. And then some devotees, they get so angry, they say, we're going to leave the movement if you don't agree with us. So let's start talking about where the anarthas come. So Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur says, first they come from sinful activities. Of course, that means vikarmic activities. Vikarmic activities means activities against the laws of God. I was listening to a class with Prabhupada this morning. It's very interesting how Prabhupada described how God has certain laws. All of us, we want to make things relative, especially in America, isn't it?
Yeah, especially in
academia, everything's relative. Not only is it relative, but in academia you're supposed to criticize religions.
Yeah.
Not only, is all religions relative. So we want to make everything relative. that's your opinion, it's my opinion, you know, there's no absolutes. Of course, that statement, there's no absolutes, is an absolute statement. So people are so stupid, they don't understand they're contradicting themselves when they say there's no absolutes. So, Prabhupada was giving the example this morning as I was listening to him, of course, in the recording. Prabhupada was giving the example, he said, look, there's laws here in America. He was talking to a reporter. He said, if I drive on the left side of the road, you know, that's illegal. And then you don't get arrested or at least get killed. But anyway, that's illegal. Prabhupada said, I may say, well, everything's all right. You know, I'm driving. I'm a safe driver. But you're violating the law. It's not simply, you know, just, you have arguments, you know, what's right, what's wrong, just like this whole abortion argument. You know, and it's all their arguments are based on the relative platform, you know. They're not based upon what has God written. You know, what is Dharma Sakshat, Bhagavat Pranitam. You know, Dharma or the laws of God, they only come from God. They don't come from me. You know, so like, of course, Prabhupada, sometimes we talk about the Manusamhita. Of course, certain parts, just to let you know, certain parts of the Manusamhita have changed, so haven't been passed down through disciplic succession, so it's, you know, we only accept those parts of the Manusamhita the Acharyas have told us to follow. Otherwise, you completely go crazy. You know, then you're not going to be eating carrots, you're not going to be eating, you know, pizza, whatever, you know. So you really follow, that's why we have an acharya, because something has to be passed down to disciplic succession for us to accept it. So anyway, so getting back to sinful activities, and actually Vishwanath Chakrabarti gives a very interesting analysis of the impetus for sinful activities. He talks about avidya, which is ignorance, obviously. Asmita, which is false identity, or identifying yourself with the body. Raga, attachment. Vesha, hate. This hate is actually really a big problem. I mean, you can go on the internet and see devotees sometimes expressing hate towards each other. And this is, you know, this is a source of sinful activity. Of course, it's also a source of offenses, which are another source of anarthas, but we'll get to that in a second. And there's abhinivesha, which is misidentity. So that's one source of anarthas. You know, so in other words, you may not be doing sinful activities, but you have these preliminary, let's say, this preliminary consciousness or preliminary illusion that leads you to sinful activities. That's what you have to cut off before it becomes a sinful activity. And anyway, so that's the first source of anartha. The second source is a little more interesting, because sinful activities obviously are sources of anartha. Pious activities. Because what happens with pious activities, one becomes addicted to the mode of goodness. And you see this sometimes, like, of course, I always mention in this regard when I was in the GBC of Hawaii, that, you know, it's so beautiful there, the weather is perfect, it's like mode of goodness place. Prabhupada said if there's any nice place in this material world, it's Hawaii. And it's hard to find people really strict with sadhana there. You know, it's just like, of course, out surf. I don't know if surfing's in the mode of goodness, but they're out surfing during Bhagavatam class. Can't say that's in the mode of goodness, but anyway. So you become addicted. Actually, Krishna says that in the Gita, that one actually becomes attached to the mode of goodness. It's addicting. And then you start to enjoy sattva guna things, just like people nowadays, of course, they want to enjoy going to the top of the Himalayas. There's big news that people are dying. So many people want to enjoy, you know, that sort of mode of goodness, climbing the Himalayas. There's a little passion there, you know, challenging the Himalayas. And they're all dying for lack of air. And then there's so many people, there's a traffic jam going up and down the Himalayas right now. Anyway, so That's the second source, pious activities. One just starts to become proud, attached to being a good person, and that's a source of anartha. And the third source is actually the most serious source, and that's what we call aparadas. Aparadas means offenses, offenses against the holy Dham, offenses against the deities, offenses in the temple worship, offenses especially against Vaishnavas. And that's perhaps, I think, the most serious source of, let's say, narthas. And so it's very easy to commit offenses against Vaishnavas. Very, very easy. Why am I saying it's very easy? Because Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes in his Harinam Chintamani that the principal quality of a Vaishnava is surrender to Krishna. However, some of the secondary qualities, that we naturally ascribe to Vaishnavas, such as peacefulness and everything like that, may or may not manifest according to the circumstances. And the Vaishnava may have some habits from past activities, or a Vaishnava may be born in a sinful situation, or a Vaishnava may have some, let's say, remnants of past sinful activities. Means that you have some disease or some legal problems, or you're ugly. It's true. I mean, if someone is extremely ugly, of course, you should never say that a Vaishnava is ugly. That may be an indication of, in the past, this is the present, like token reaction or reaction for what they did in the past, but it has nothing to do with the present situation. So the principal quality, this is, Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes this very clear in the Harinam Chintamani about Gona Mukhya. That means secondary and principal qualities of a Vaishnava. Principal qualities, he's just trying to serve Krishna. Secondary, for one reason or other, may not be manifest. So, therefore, sometimes you may be able to think you're finding fault in a Vaishnava because the secondary qualities are not manifest, or something appears, or he's had an accidental deviation from Krishna consciousness. So, very, very, very dangerous. And actually, it's much more dangerous than any other type of offenses. It said that even if you commit offenses in seva aparada means service to the deities, those offenses, if you stop doing them, can be rectified by chanting Harinam. But offenses committed against Vaishnavas, there's only one way. You can go on chanting, but there's only one way to rectify them, is to go to the Vaishnava and go to their feet, because even the dust of their feet may be upset with you, and beg for forgiveness. Just like that story of Gopal Chapala in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, where Gopal Chapala criticized, actually tried to frame Srivas Thakur by putting the ingredients of Durga outside of his door, to make it appear that he was worshipping Durga instead of, Krishna. And Srivas Thakur didn't take it so seriously, but Gopal Chapala got leprosy. And there were worms just eating away at his body. And he went to Lord Chaitanya and said, "Please forgive me." And Lord Chaitanya said, "No, I curse you if I be bitten by these same worms for many births." Finally, he did take shelter of Srivas Thakur and was forgiven. So this is the only method of overcoming that particular source of anarthas. And the fourth source of anarthas is called bhakti yuta. That means the byproducts of bhakti. And Vishnu Chakrabarti Thakur describes them as material wealth. Just like, you may be a sannyasi and so maybe giving you donations, and you think, wow, now I'm really, whatever, the cat's meow on top of the world, whatever expression you may have. This, money can really pollute the consciousness. You see, even in the material world, when someone wins a lottery, of course they're doing sinful activities to begin with because they're playing, they're gambling. Their whole life falls apart. And so there's a natural tendency to be very prideful. When one acquires Janmaishvarya Shutasha Shibir, what does that mean? One has a good birth. This is Queen Kunti's prayer, of course. Aishvarya, opulence, Shrutasha, becomes very learned. You see sometimes if someone's very learned, they think they become intolerant of other people, isn't it? It just becomes, we're so proud, here's my PhD. I have a PhD from Cambridge. Oh, you puny little Hare Krishnas, I have left you behind like dust. So anyway, these things come from bhakti actually. And so respect, position, fame. You go somewhere, like you arrive, like a sannyasi says, I arrive, doesn't happen here of course, but I arrive at a temple, there's a big kirtan outside greeting me. Here it doesn't matter, here, oh, just him again. But sometimes you go to other temples, there's a kirtan. I said, well, it's just like the Beatles. With groupies. So these are sources of the anarthas. And in the Bhajan Mahasya, there's a slightly different analysis of the anarthas as far as types. They don't really, it's not so much like the sources direct, of course it is the sources indirectly, but the types of anarthas. So I'll just go quickly over these four types. The four types are Vriyadarbalyam, which means the weakness of the heart, which is attachment to things not related to Krishna and gives birth to enviousness, deceitfulness, and a desire for fame. That's one analysis of anarthas. These aren't necessarily the sources, but they can be taken as the sources. Another one is, of course, we mentioned before, the aparada. This is a manifestation. He's mentioning this as a manifestation of anarthas rather than the source. Aparadas towards the name, the form of the Lord, devotees, and even aparadas towards other living entities. I was just speaking to Bhakti Churu Maharaj the other night, and he was telling me what a great saint Tamal Krishna Maharaj was. He was describing, he said, how can anyone accuse Tamal Krishna Maharaj of hurting Prabhupada when he observed that one time there was a mosquito on Tamal Krishna Maharaj and was sucking his blood, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj got ready to swat him, and then he said, no, I can't kill him. He's a living entity. Wow. I wish I was that compassionate. I swat them. But anyway, so in other words, one has to respect all living entities. Even Prabhupada, of course, Prabhupada sometimes did say that we should swat the mosquitoes when they were biting. Because there was a mosquito, Srila Kirti Prabhu tells the story, there was a mosquito within the mosquito net that was around Prabhupada in his bed. And Srila Kirti was getting ready to hit him. And Prabhupada said, no, because he hasn't attacked yet. So as soon as he landed on Prabhupada, Prabhupada said, get him! He's attacked. Because you're allowed to attack living entities who attack you. Give fire, give poison, etc. like that. Steal your wife, or things like that. Then you're allowed to fight back. But not that you take revenge, it's a different thing. Like Prabhupada said one time, there's a devotee who took revenge on another devotee because the devotee had taken his wife away, because the wife went voluntarily. And Prabhupada said, no, that's not proper. Revenge is not there. You could have defended your wife if she didn't want to go. So, anyway, so one should not even offend other living entities who are not devotees. One should adhere to the principle of Satya Priya Hitam, truthfulness, pleasing, beneficial speech, as Krishna mentions in the Gita. And then the third type of anartha is called a Asat Trishna. which means desire for material objects, or even going to heaven. Like many times people from India don't want to go to heaven, go to Swarga. Or desire for mystic powers. You know, sometimes people, probably, I was listening also in class, probably yesterday, probably was talking about how the yogis, they perform these different mystical performances to be able to transport themselves, become anima, lagima, mahima, city, become as light as a feather, or small, or become big, or prapti, be able to reach out and make a deposit or no withdrawal from the bank. I would like to have that one. Build a big temple. So anyway, so a desire for that, or even the desire for liberation is considered an anartha. Just like if you're thinking, I just want to get out of this world, rather than I want to be with Krishna. I mean, the desire to be with Krishna is good, or desire to go back to Godhead is good. But if you're just thinking this material world is miserable, get me out, that's an anartha, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur and the Vajranahasha. It's interesting. So we can identify. So the reason these things are being mentioned is so that we can identify these things. Of course, you can say, you know, because I'm very much affectionate towards Krishna, I cannot be defeated by demons like the associates of Kamsa or the internal enemies of the senses. Well, the point is, if you're very affectionate towards Krishna, then Krishna gives you the intelligence on how to deal with these things. It's not that you just sit back. You know, why would Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur describe all these anarthas if Krishna was just going to take care of them and you were just going to sit back and just say, you know, bye-bye anarthas? Because you have to be aware of them and utilizing what is the intelligence, the intelligence given by Krishna to deal with them, and utilizing the intelligence to control the mind, because the mind will be absorbed. As Krishna says in the Gita, the mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and the enemy as well. Uncontrolled mind is the enemy. So the mind will be attached to these things, so you have to use your intelligence how to identify the enemy. Just like in a battle, you have to know the difference between the enemy and your friend. It's like when Lord Ram was attacked by the 14,000 Rakshasas in the Dandakaranya forest. Interesting. You know what weapon he used? He used the bewilderment weapon. So that each and every one of these 14,000 Rakshasas thought that the other Rakshasa was Ram. That's a pretty good way to kill your enemies, isn't it? Have your enemies kill each other. He was using one of the techniques, you know, getting the enemies to kill each other. Techniques of Nitya Shastra. So we have to be able to identify the enemy. You know, I've seen the enemy and the enemy is us, you know, the same it goes. We have to be able to identify, you know, these anarthas, to be able to transcend them, to fight against them. Krishna consciousness is a fight against these unwanted things. And why are they unwanted? Because they're interfering, they're keeping us from the nectar for which we are always anxious, which is the taste of the holy name. You wonder why your taste is not so great for the holy name. It's because of these anarthas. You know, of course, particularly the aparada. And then the final variety of anarthas that Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions in the Vajranahasha is called Tattva Vibrama. Vibrama means illusion. Tattva means the Tattva, basically the essential truths of Vaishnava philosophy. You know, Sambandha information. And that means the different tattvas and their relationships to each other. So he talks about these, and there's different types of illusion about spiritual knowledge. One is illusion about your identity, thinking you're the body. Another one is illusion about, it's called Paratattva Brahma, not Brahma, Brahma, not Brahma. which is an illusion about the Supreme Personality of Godhead's identity. You know, thinking that Brahman is superior to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then there's another one called Saja Sadhana Brahma, which is an illusion about the process of sadhana and prema bhakti. In other words, if one's on a higher level of Krishna consciousness than one actually is, then he's an illusion about the process of bhakti. If he doesn't have the adhikar, that means the right to perform a certain type of bhakti, like Raganuga bhakti, and he or she thinks they're on that level, then that's an anartha. Or about even the process of sadhana and bhakti. And then finally, the last one is Virodi Vishaya Brahma. Illusion regarding the subjects unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. In other words, like if I think that a particular subject is favorable to Krishna consciousness, but it's not really favorable, you know, I'm just attached to it. Let's say, you know, movies, for example. Let's say I go watch all the latest, what movies? Anyway, whatever. Bollywood movie. I don't want to mention Star Wars. Because I do watch them. But anyway, the latest Bollywood movies, thinking, no, this is going to remind me of Krishna, you know, it keeps me like really sentimental about love and everything like that. So, you know, you think it's favorable to Krishna consciousness, but it's actually not favorable. This is one of the problems with Yukta Vairagya. You know, Yukta Vairagya, if we go too far with Yukta Vairagya means using things in Krishna's service rather than renouncing them. You know, rather than falgu Vairagya or renouncing things. So sometimes we think we can use things in Krishna's service, but we're not either qualified to use those things, even though they may be able to be used, or those things really can't be used in Krishna's service. I mean, there actually are some things that can't be used in Krishna's service, or we get entangled in using something that can be used. I'll give you an example. Let's say the internet, you know, Facebook, can be used in Krishna's service, but then you get entangled in it and it drags you away from Krishna. So anyway, so these are some of the types of analyses that have been given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and finally Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, from these particular sources of anarthas come the waves of anarthas, kama, krodha, mada, matsarya, lava, moha, mada, etc., which are called the 6 anarthas, which are represented by this Sadgarbhas. That means the 6 sons of Devaki that were killed before Krishna and Balaram appeared. Anyway, hopefully it wasn't too much information for everybody. All glory is to His divine grace. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.